Most people ignore half dollars, but some from 1972, 1776 to 1976, and 1979 can surprise you. Certain Kennedy and Bicentennial half dollars have rare versions collectors actively search for. 1 Small detail, barely noticeable, can separate loose change from a serious collectible. Before you spend a half dollar, take a closer look. Like and subscribe for more hidden coin secrets. The 1972 Kennedy half dollar is one of those coins that feels like it should be valuable just because it's a Kennedy. Big, heavy, iconic, and tied to one of the most collected names in U.S. history. But here's the truth that shocks a lot of people the first time they hear it. Most 1972 half dollars are not rare. Most are not silver. Most are worth face value or just a small premium. And that's exactly why this coin is dangerous for collectors. Because when a coin looks important, people assume every example is a jackpot. But the real money isn't in the date alone. It's in the mistakes. The ones that slipped through the mint when machines were running fast, dies were wearing down, and quality control couldn't catch everything. And yes, before we dive in, let's set the ceiling of the hobby. In the world of extreme US era coins, collectors have paid insane numbers, in ranges like $82,200 to $178,250, for the right kind of verified, dramatic, once-in-a-lifetime mint mistake. That's not a normal 1972 half dollar. That's the legend tier of era collecting. But here's the exciting part. The 1972 Kennedy half is a coin where real errors do exist, and some of them are absolutely huntable if you know what to look for. So today, we're breaking down what a normal 1972 half dollar is worth, what kinds of errors can turn it into something special, and how to tell the difference between a real mint error and a coin that just got beat up in circulation. First, the baseline. A normal 1972 Kennedy half dollar is a clad coin. That means it's not made of 90% silver like the early Kennedy halves from 1964. It's a copper core sandwiched between outer layers of copper nickel. The easiest way to tell? Look at the edge. If you see a copper-colored stripe running through the middle, that's clad. A normal circulated 1972 half dollar is usually worth face value, 50 cents. Some people pay a little more because halves aren't seen as often in change, but it's still a common coin overall. In uncirculated condition, it can carry a premium, especially if it has strong luster and no marks, but we're still talking normal collector money. Now, let's talk about what actually makes this coin exciting. Errors. And not the fake errors people post online. I'm talking about real mint-made mistakes, things that happen during the striking process, the planchet preparation, or die production point. One of the first big categories is doubling. If you've been in coin collecting for more than 5 minutes, you've probably heard the words double die. But here's the trap. Not all doubling is valuable. Some doubling is mechanical doubling, caused by a slight shift during striking. It looks flat and shelf-like, almost like the letters have a shadow that's been scraped to the side. Real double die doubling looks different. It looks like a second image, a true split in the design. And on a Kennedy half, you want to check areas like the date, "In God We Trust," "Liberty," and the details of Kennedy's profile. A strong double die variety can be worth serious money, especially in higher grades. In circulated condition, it may be a modest premium. In crisp, uncirculated condition with clean surfaces, it can climb into the hundreds or more depending on how dramatic it is. Next up, off-center strikes. This is one of the easiest errors to spot, and it's also one of the most popular because it looks wild even to someone who doesn't collect coins. An off-center strike happens when the blank planchet isn't seated correctly in the press. The die comes down, but the design lands partially off the coin. You'll see a blank crescent area where no design exists. The value depends on how off-center it is and whether the date is visible. If the date is missing, it's still cool but less valuable. If the date is fully visible and the off-center is dramatic, now collectors pay attention. A strong off-center Kennedy half can sell for hundreds, and the more extreme and clean it is, the higher it can go. Now let's talk about broad strikes. A broad strike happens when the coin is struck without the collar that normally contains the metal. Instead of forming a tight rim, the coin spreads outward and becomes wider than normal. It can look stretched and the rim may be weak or missing. Broad strikes are collectible and can bring a premium, but the value depends on how dramatic the spread is and how nice the coin looks. A mild broad strike might be a fun $20 to $50 coin. A dramatic one in strong condition can go much higher. Now here's a category that gets serious fast. Double strikes. A double strike happens when the coin is struck once, fails to eject, and gets struck again. The second strike can be rotated, shifted, or overlapping. The result can look like a ghost image of Kennedy or a duplicated ring of lettering. These are highly collectible because they're unmistakably mint-made. And on a large coin like a $50, the visuals can be insane. Depending on how dramatic it is, values can range from a couple $100s to several thousand for the really impressive ones. Next, struck-through errors. This happens when something gets between the die and the coin during the strike, like grease, debris, or another foreign material. The result can be missing letters, distorted surfaces, or strange textures that look like parts of the design melted away. Light struck-through grease errors might only bring a small premium, but dramatic struck-through errors, where large areas are missing detail, can be very desirable. Now let's talk about a favorite category for modern clad coins: missing clad layer errors. Since 1972 halves are clad, there's always the possibility that one of the outer layers didn't bond correctly. When a coin is missing an outer clad layer, it can look more coppery, more dull, and sometimes the details will appear different because the metal is softer underneath. These errors can be worth hundreds to well over 1,000 depending on how complete the missing layer is, how clean the coin is, and whether it's certified. But here's the warning: people fake these by sanding or chemically altering coins. A real missing layer error has specific characteristics, including correct weight and mint appearance. If you think you found one, it's worth getting checked. Now we enter the legend tier of errors. Wrong planchet errors. This is when a $50 is struck on a blank meant for another coin, or on a planchet with the wrong metal composition. These are extremely rare, and when they happen, they create coins that shouldn't exist. A $50 struck on the wrong planchet might be the wrong size, the design might not fit, and the weight will usually be off. These are the kinds of errors that can explode in value because they're not just a mistake, they're a major production failure that escaped the mint. And that's where that $82,200 to $178,250 energy lies. Not in normal coins, not in minor doubling, but in the extreme, verified, once-in-a-lifetime mistakes that collectors fight over like trophies. So let's make the difference clear. A normal 1972 Kennedy $50 is usually worth 50 cents in circulated condition. In uncirculated condition, it can be worth more, but still normal collector money. A 1972 half with minor errors, small off-centers, light die cracks, small struck-throughs, can be worth tens to a few hundred depending on how dramatic it is. A 1972 half with major errors, missing clad layer, dramatic double strike, wrong planchet, can jump into serious money territory. So here's the hunting strategy. Check the edge for the copper stripe so you know it's clad. Inspect the date and lettering for real doubling. Look for off-center strikes, broad strikes, and any signs of double strikes. Watch for unusual color that could suggest missing clad layer, but don't assume, verify. And whatever you do, don't clean the coin. Cleaning kills value fast. Original surfaces matter. Because the 1972 Kennedy $50 is a coin most people overlook. But the right one, the one that left the mint with a mistake, can turn a common 50-cent piece into a collector's trophy. So check your change, check old rolls, check inherited collections, and don't sleep on the ordinary years. Sometimes the treasure is hiding in plain sight. Until next time, happy treasure hunting. The 1776 to 1976 Kennedy $50 is one of the most iconic coins America ever produced. It doesn't just represent money, it represents a moment, a national celebration, a piece of history you can actually hold in your hand. The Bicentennial era was loud, patriotic, and unforgettable, and the mint made sure the coinage matched that energy. But here's what most people don't realize: because these coins were made in massive numbers and saved by the millions, most bicentennial $50 are not rare at all. In fact, a lot of people have them sitting in drawers right now thinking, this has to be worth something. And the truth is, most of them aren't. But a small number of them are different. A small number of them were struck wrong, misaligned, doubled, clipped, missing layers, even struck in ways that should never have escaped the mint. And that's where the real collector money starts. Because in the world of extreme mint errors, there are coins that have reached insane levels, ranges like $78,450 to $172,340, when the error is dramatic enough, rare enough, and verified. That doesn't mean every bicentennial $50 is a six-figure coin. It means the ceiling is high when the mistake is big enough. So today, We're going to break down what a normal 1776 to 1976 Kennedy half dollar is worth, what the real error coins look like, and how you can tell the difference between a common spender and a piece that collectors will chase hard. First, let's build the baseline. A normal bicentennial Kennedy half dollar has John F. Kennedy on the front and the special bicentennial reverse on the back with Independence Hall. The date shows 1776 to 1976, and that's the first thing that makes people stop and stare. It looks special. It looks historic. But here's the reality. The mint produced an enormous amount of them. Most were struck in copper-nickel clad for circulation, and many were pulled out of circulation immediately because people loved the design. So their common. A circulated one is usually worth face value, 50 cents. Maybe a little more if someone wants one quickly, but not much. Uncirculated ones can bring a premium, but it's still not the kind of money that changes your life. Now, there are also bicentennial half dollars that were made in special compositions, like 40% silver versions for collectors. Those can be worth more because of the silver content and collector demand. But again, they're not automatically rare either. They were made to be collected. The real excitement is not the date, it's the mistakes. The first major error type you need to know is the off-center strike. This happens when the blank isn't seated properly in the press. The die comes down and the design lands off to the side, leaving part of the coin blank. These are popular because they're dramatic and obvious. You don't need to be an expert to see it. A small off-center might be worth $20 to $100 depending on how much is missing. But if it's a major off-center with the date clearly visible and the coin still looks clean, the value can climb fast. Collectors love big, bold errors that are easy to show off. Next up is the clipped planchet. This is when the blank metal disc was cut incorrectly before striking, leaving a curved chunk missing from the edge. It looks like someone took a bite out of the coin. A real clip usually has a smooth curve, not jagged damage, and often you'll see weakness on the opposite rim because of how the blank sat in the press. A small clip might bring $30 to $80. A larger, clean clip can bring $150, $300, or more depending on how dramatic it looks. Now let's talk about broad strikes. A broad strike happens when the coin is struck without the collar that normally contains the metal. The result is a coin that spreads outward and looks wider than normal, often with a weird rim. Broad strikes are collectible because they look wrong in a clean way, like a mistake you can immediately recognize as mint-made. Depending on the strength of the broad strike and the condition, these can range from $50 to a few $100s. Now we get into the errors that make collectors slow down and grab a magnifier. Doubling. There are different types of doubling, and not all of them are valuable. Machine doubling can look like flat, shelf-like shadows on the letters. It's common and usually not worth much. But true double die errors are different. They come from a double die itself, meaning the design was duplicated in the die before striking. The result is stronger, cleaner doubling, especially in the lettering, Kennedy's profile, and the details on Independence Hall. A true double die bicentennial half can bring serious money depending on how strong it is. A minor double die might be $50 to $200. A bold double die in high grade can climb much higher, especially if it's certified and recognized by collectors. Now let's talk about double strikes and multi-strikes. This is where the coin gets struck more than once. Maybe it didn't eject properly. Maybe it shifted. Maybe it rotated. The result can look insane, like two coins merged into one. These are some of the most visually exciting errors because no two look exactly the same. A small double strike might be a few $100s. A dramatic rotated double strike can bring much more, especially if the coin is uncirculated and the strike is clean. Now here's where things get serious. Missing clad layer errors. A bicentennial half dollar is usually a layered coin. If one layer fails to bond properly or is missing, the coin can show unusual color and weight. Sometimes it looks coppery. Sometimes it looks pale. Sometimes the details look weak in strange ways. These errors can be valuable, but they're also commonly faked or confused with damage. So if you find one that looks off color, don't assume it's an error. Weigh it. Compare it. A true missing layer error often has a noticeable weight difference and a very specific look. And now the holy grail category for modern errors. Wrong planchet strikes. This is when the half-dollar design is struck on a planchet meant for another coin. The size might be wrong. The weight might be wrong. The design might not fit. It can look like a half-dollar trapped inside the body of a different coin. Wrong planchet errors are rare. They're not supposed to happen, and they're definitely not supposed to escape. But when they do, collectors go crazy. This is also the category where the biggest money lives. That $78,450 to $172,340 range? That's the kind of territory people associate with extreme, verified, once-in-a-lifetime mint errors, especially when the coin is dramatic, unique, and in top condition. Most bicentennial half-dollars will never touch that. But a legendary wrong planchet strike or a spectacular multi-strike error absolutely can put a coin into headline status. So let's make the difference crystal clear. A normal 1776 to 1976 Kennedy half-dollar is common. Circulated, it's usually worth 50 cents. Uncirculated, it can be worth more, but it's still not rare. A silver collector version can be worth more because of silver content, but it's still not automatically a jackpot. A bicentennial half-dollar with a real mint error is where the game changes. Off-center strikes, clips, broad strikes, double dies, double strikes, missing layers, and especially wrong planchet errors can push values from tens to hundreds, sometimes thousands. And the extreme end of the hobby, the verified monsters, that's where you hear numbers like $78,450 to $172,340. So here's the hunting strategy. Check every bicentennial half for strike quality. Look at the rim. Look for missing parts of the design. Look for doubling on letters and details. Check the color. If it looks unusual, weigh it. And whatever you do, don't clean it. Cleaning destroys value fast. If you think you found something big, compare it to verified examples and consider authentication. Because the difference between a cool curiosity and a serious collector coin is proof. The bicentennial Kennedy half-dollar is a piece of American history that millions of people saved. Most are ordinary, but the right one, with the right mistake, can turn a patriotic souvenir into a real treasure. So check your change, check your old rolls, and don't assume the special date automatically means special value. Sometimes the real value isn't in the date, it's in the error. Until next time, happy treasure hunting. The 1979 Kennedy half-dollar is one of those coins that feels like it shouldn't be valuable. It's not ancient. It's not gold. It's not even silver in the way people assume older half-dollars are. Most of the time, it's just a big, heavy coin that shows up in a drawer, in a jar, or in a random roll from the bank and gets spent without a second thought. But that's exactly why it's dangerous, because coins that look ordinary are the ones that slip past everyone. And when something goes wrong at the mint, those mistakes can hide in plain sight for decades before the right collector spots them. And in the world of extreme US mint errors, prices can reach levels that sound unreal. We're talking ranges like $70,450 to $165,560 when the error is dramatic, rare, and verified. Not for a normal 1979 half-dollar, but for the kind of mint accident that shouldn't exist. So today we're breaking down the 1979 Kennedy half-dollar error coins that actually matter, how to spot them, and the difference between a regular half-dollar worth 50 cents and an error coin that collectors will fight over. Let's start with the baseline so you don't get fooled. A normal 1979 Kennedy half-dollar is a clad coin. That means it's not made of precious metal. It has a copper core with nickel outer layers. In circulated condition, it's usually worth face value, 50 cents. Even though half-dollars don't show up in pocket change much anymore, the truth is that millions were made, and most are still common. Now, condition can add a premium. If you find a truly uncirculated 1979 half-dollar with clean surfaces, strong luster, and no major marks, collectors might pay more than face value. But we're still talking normal collector premiums, not pay off your bills money. The real money starts when something is wrong in a way only the mint could create. And that's where error coins come in. The first big category you want to understand is off-center strikes. An off-center half-dollar happens when the blank isn't seated correctly in the press. The dies come down and the design lands partially off the coin, leaving a blank crescent area with no design at all. It's one of the easiest errors to spot because you don't need a microscope. It looks wrong instantly. The value depends on how far off-center it is and whether the date is visible. A small off-center might sell for $20 to $50. A dramatic off-center with a full date and strong details can jump into the hundreds. And because half-dollars are larger coins, dramatic off-centers on them can look even more impressive than on smaller denominations. Next up is the broad strike. This happens when the coin is struck without the collar that normally keeps it contained. Without that collar, the metal spreads outward and the coin comes out wider than normal with a weird rim and a slightly pancaked look. Broad strikes are popular because they're clearly mint-made and hard to fake convincingly. A broad strike 1979 $half can range from a modest premium to a couple $100 depending on how strong the spread is and how clean the surfaces are. Now let's talk about clipped planchets. A clipped planchet happens before the coin is struck, when the blank is cut incorrectly and a curved chunk is missing. It looks like a bite was taken out of the edge. But the key is that it should be a smooth, natural curve, not jagged damage. Small clips can be worth $20 to $60. Larger clips, especially on a clean coin, can climb higher. And on a $half, a big clip is very noticeable, which makes it more collectible. Now we get into a category that makes coins look like they're growing scars. Die cracks and cuds. A die crack happens when the die starts splitting under stress. That crack transfers onto the coin as a raised line. A cud is more extreme, when a chunk of the die breaks away and leaves a raised blob of metal, usually near the rim. Minor die cracks can be common and not worth much. But big cracks and dramatic cuds are different. They're visual, they're bold, and collectors pay for them. A strong cud on a Kennedy $half can easily bring $100 to $300 or more depending on size and appearance. Now let's talk about one of the most exciting errors for any collector to find. A double strike. A double strike happens when the coin gets struck, doesn't eject properly, and then gets hit again. The second strike can be rotated, offset, or partially overlapping, creating a coin that looks like it came out of a mint nightmare. This is the kind of error that makes even non-collectors stop and stare. A strong double strike on a 1979 $half can be worth hundreds or even thousands depending on how dramatic the second strike is. Then there are strike-through errors. This happens when something gets between the die and the coin during the strike, like grease, debris, or a piece of foreign material. The result can be missing letters, strange textures, or parts of the design looking melted or incomplete. Some strike-through errors are minor and only worth a small premium, but dramatic strike-throughs, especially those that remove major parts of the design, can become serious collector pieces. Now we enter the rarest and most dangerous territory. Wrong planchet errors. This is the category where legends are made. A wrong planchet $half means the Kennedy $half design was struck on a blank meant for a different coin. Wrong size, wrong metal, wrong weight, something that should never have happened in the normal minting process. These errors are rare, and when they're real and verified, they can become some of the most valuable modern coins out there. This is where you start hearing numbers like $70,450 to $165, $560. That range is not for a normal 1979 $half. It's not for a simple off-center. That's the world of extreme errors. Wrong planchets, spectacular multi-strikes, and freak accidents that survive long enough to be discovered and authenticated. So how do you hunt smart? Here's the simple strategy for 1979 Kennedy halves. First, look for obvious visual errors. Off-center strikes, clips, broad strikes, double strikes, and big cuds are the ones you can spot quickly. Second, check the edge. A normal clad $half has a visible copper band on the edge. If the edge looks wrong, too thick, too thin, or the wrong color, slow down and investigate. Edge clues can sometimes hint at the wrong planchet or missing layers. Third, don't clean the coin. Not even a little. Cleaning destroys collector value fast, especially on error coins where original surfaces matter. Fourth, if you think you found something extreme, compare it to known error types and consider professional authentication. Because the difference between a cool $50 error and a true high-dollar piece is proof. And the difference between a rare wrong planchet and a damaged coin is expert verification. Most 1979 Kennedy $half are worth 50 cents. But the right one, with the right mistake, can turn a common coin into a collector trophy. So check your rolls. Check your jars. Check that old coin cup in your house. Because the next time you see a 1979 $half, it might not just be change. It might be the kind of mint accident collectors dream about. Drop a comment if you found any strange $half lately, and until next time, happy treasure hunting.